Concert promoter. Someone that organizes events and sells tickets. You would think it's that simple, yet it is anything but.
Oh, that's easy.
The man I have in studio today has been doing this since 1974. And for the last 46 years, he has put together and been a part of over 12,000 events.
It's insane.
He has rubbed elbows with that of Herbie Hancock, Paul McCartney, Alice Cooper, Aerosmith, Roger Waters, Jeff Beck, Johnny Depp, Barbra Streisand, Santana, B.B. King, The Doors, Chuck Berry, Bon Jovi, Jerry Garcia, Muddy Waters, don't worry, I'm not going to name them all, Whitney Houston, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Tom Petty, and the likes of Rodney Dangerfield, Andrew Dice Clay, Robin Williams, and as his good friend Kirk Gibson would say, he is the straw that stirs the drink. He is the man that brought music to the Valley, and he's the man that's going to bring it back. The 2005 Arizona Arts and Entertainment Hall of Fame inductee, Mr. Danny Zelisko.
Get ready for the real estate show that takes you across the barriers and into the danger zone. That Bitchin' Real Estate Podcast with your host, Tenacious T.
Oh, yeah. This book. Danny gave me a call when I asked him to be on the show. And he said, I have a book that I wrote and finally finished in 2020. And the first thought was, oh, you know, another book. Everybody writes a book and he should do it audio. But when I got the book, I completely understood what you were talking about. This is not a book. This is a coffee table journey of memories, of friendships, of failures, of successes, of hardships. I cried. I laughed. I found so many moments that reminded me of the nostalgia of my own time, but that also showed me a regular guy can do extraordinary things. And I really, really, really enjoyed it. This is something that cannot, well, I'm sure it could be an audiobook, but it would benefit the reader to look at the pictures, to see the eyes and the excitement in the pictures and be there in the moment. Because I remember an interview where you said you were going to put all the pictures in the back of the book, or someone had suggested that, and it would not have been the same impact.
Most books are like that, where they do, like if it's a 300-page book, they'll separate every 100 pages with a photo section of 5 or 6 pages. And I've always found, and it's always bothered me since I was a kid, if you're reading a book and you get 50, 60 pages in and then there's photos, you got to go back to those first 50, 60 pages, and it interrupts your whole train of thought of what you're doing when you're reading.
It does.
So it's incredibly harder to make the book because if you have it in there the way I do, Tandra, who works with me, and finished the final edit on this, which was like so hard for her to do. She struggled with it, but every time you move a word or a picture when you're doing it like that, it throws the whole book off.
Yes.
So you have to be very, very careful. It made it much harder to do it. And, you know, see the way this book is, it's shaped. It's called a landscape book. We've just done a portrait-size book, which is the book like this.
Yes.
Right? And it opens normally like that. In order to do a Kindle, which we just did for Amazon, we had to completely reformat the book and start completely over again.
Yeah.
So I have 2 different versions of the book. And the fun thing about the new version that Amazon has is that we had to add 50 or 60 more pictures because when we re-edited it for the portrait size, there's these big holes. You know, in between various places where there was once a picture, but they won't fit. So poor me, I got to put another 50 pictures in. There's so many great pictures that I've been fortunate enough to have been a part of, like you see in this book. It's fascinating to me to look back and go, God, who is this guy?
It is, and what really helped me is there's a lot of artists that I'm not familiar with. You know, yes. I mean, I love music, and always was a part of my life, but we don't know every single artist out there, you know, and you have to be a true enthusiast. But what was fun was if I didn't know the artist, I could quickly Google and listen to that music and understand what you're talking about, because the picture's right there and I can go right there, right then, without having to flip through the pages, like you say. And it made it a true journey. And there's also a structure to the book. It's not like, okay, I was bored and I did this. You take pieces of the story where you met the artist or the person and expand on how they affected your life, but then you move on to another artist or another person. That must have been the very difficult part for you, is who do you highlight? Who do you talk about? Because I'm sure everyone that you came in contact to changed you in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. You know, after 40-something years of doing that, everybody makes some sort of impression on you. Some people influence you. Some people make you angry. Some people give you smiles when you think back about them. And you never want to insult anybody in such a book. And not have them included. I had a few phone calls from people saying, why aren't I in the book? And how do you say to somebody, the people that are in the book either had better stories, better hair, or even more so, they had something that was in step with me and them in their business, because most of this is about business. It's not about friendships and talking about your buddy from down the street when you were growing up and all that thing. It's like, other than in the Phoenix area, not that many people know who I am. No, and I didn't want to assume that when I wrote this about whatever I thought was interesting, that they would find interesting. So I edited in my head. Once this story started to come out in paper and we're editing and we're putting the stories in what order chronologically, it got to the point where I ended up taking out some chapters because they just didn't fit in, and it made the book even longer. Because as it is, one of the other reasons I went this size book, this shape, was because I could get more stuff on each page.
Yes.
It would have ended up being more like 400 pages, which is an awful long book for a rookie writer. It
is, and having published my own book, I know the difficulties of creating the structure. Like I said, the telling of the story is so important. You have to capture the reader long enough for them to actually want to flip the page, and then keep them flipping the page. And there are a lot of pictures in here. Pictures that, you know, I posted a few, and some of my friends were like, where did you get that? And I'm like, well, you're going to have to order the book, man.
There you go. Yeah, you know, with this one, I would be so happy if I could, like, break even on the actual costs of printing and the writing and everything that was involved. That would be, like, to me, a triumph.
Yes.
Because my whole life is geared about breaking even. It's really about making money. Yeah. And it's also about working with great artists and having great times. And this is like a collection of a lot of those great times.
Yes.
Way at the beginning, when we were doing this, I decided I wasn't going to use it to get back at anybody who might have offended my poor little self, you know, along the years. And there have been some people there were some really weird, confusing times that I still don't understand how or why things turned out with certain people the way they did. But this isn't the place to figure that out. No. I'd rather stumble on something new ahead of me.
Right. So you are a Chicago-born son, a Cubs fan, and the first time I cried in your book was Brian Piccolo. That really struck me because he was young, but he was gracious. He was very gracious to a kid that just wanted to help him make some money off of autographs. And he's like, hey, you should get paid for this too. Can you tell us a little bit about those moments?
Well, I met him when he first got out of college. He got out of college in '64, and I was never a big college sports fan because I didn't go to college. And at that point, I didn't know if I was going to go or not. I was only 12 or 13. But I've always been kind of an underdog supporter because I, too, feel like over the years, I've been an underdog too. A lot of kids were taller than me. They ran faster. Their parents had more money.
Yeah.
I didn't sit there and go, woe is me. I'm short, which I am.
So am I.
Yeah, nothing wrong with short. This was a way of just growing up with myself in terms of thinking about
what
happened.
What I really enjoyed is exactly what you said. You're a kid, and you're figuring out a way to meet your people, your heroes.
And you got to figure out how you're going to belong there, because I've seen so many times where people, they're just nervous, they stumble over themselves, and whoever it is that they want to impress or at least be able to stay a little while longer with, they'll get tired of people that act out.
Yeah.
And they, people don't do it on purpose. It's normal to get shaky when
for sure.
you're around one of your people that you've only seen on TV or in the newspaper on baseball cards or something like that. But in Brian's case, I already had an affinity for him because he was the top rusher in the college football league. And he got passed over. Nobody drafted him.
Yeah.
I mean, he was screwed. And they ended up signing him as a free agent. And it was the same year Gale Sayers came out, who while he was a famous runner already as a college player, when he got into the pros, Piccolo was a better runner for numbers, but Sayers was something magic and special. Brian was lucky he got drafted even the way that he did. And who knew what impact he was going to make on the world? I mean, everybody knows that movie, and I'm so sad that it took him getting this terrible disease and dying at a very young age. That's what it took for him to become a household word instead of the way that he wanted it, which is to be known as a great dad and a great football player.
He did get a chance to break some barriers by becoming roommates with Sayers. With
Gale Sayers, and that was the first black and white duo. And they used to get after each other. it was just so funny. I mean, and only friends can talk like that to each other. I wouldn't say what they said to each other. I mean, he'd be going, "Hey, Sayers, what are we having tonight?" He goes, "Don't tell me it's watermelon again." That kind of stuff. I mean, just the stuff that guys do to each other. And you go, "No, we're going to have some of that pasta with gravy. We have sauce in our house. We don't have gravy." And they would just get after it. It was fun, And to me, what was special about days like that and things like that is that I was privy to these very private conversations, but they felt good enough about me being around that, they would do them in front of me. And that's when you've kind of arrived, or you made it.
And you held that essence your entire life.
Yeah.
Because there is a reason why you are the straw that stirs the drink. Because you are that guy that anyone can sit in a room with, right?
That was fun that Gibby used that in the forward, but that was actually a Reggie Jackson line.
Was it really?
And he was talking about himself. Reggie's never been known for being shy or not proud of his abilities, but I thought it was a great line. But
Ernie Banks,
the mayor of the world. We met Ernie, my brother and I. We met him a few years before Piccolo, and we were allowed to go down to Wrigley Field from our suburban home. We were maybe 12 miles away from Wrigley, so it was a matter of a couple of bus rides. But I went with my older brother, and he was maybe 13 or so when we started going down there to see the players, and it was a blast. I mean, I would still do it today. I consider the Wrigley Field area very, very safe, but I ended up going down there myself when I was like 9, 10 years old.
That's crazy.
And then my parents found out that I'd been doing that, and they flipped out. But nothing ever happened, thankfully, and I always managed to avoid any trouble, and I got what I set out for, which was to get a pocket full of cards signed by these people I've been watching. The great thing about those years, 63 through about 68, was this is when the the greatest football and baseball players, as far as I'm concerned, were in rare form. They were out then. That's when they were playing. Now they're older guys. They're older. They're still older than me if they're alive, and they got to be a part of this team during the modern age, as opposed to like a Babe Ruth or a Lou Gehrig. Was very much the olden days and at the beginning of baseball, which were very special times. But growing up in Chicago in the 60s, the whole everything that was going on there, Ernie was a pivotal figure of Chicago.
Yes.
All from the time I was born, I knew his name. And the fact that I ended up getting to be friends with him was, I couldn't have asked for more. You know, I mean, my brother and Ernie were great friends. Jimmy did publicity for Ernie after Ernie quit playing ball in the early 70s. And we all continued to be friends. And he would call or I would call, and he'd come out for spring training, and we got to hang out. Played golf with him a couple times, which was unbelievable.
Yeah, I can't even.
Me and him and Billy Williams played golf, and these two guys, they have these great swings as batters, but as golfers, their swings were just flawless. They're beautiful. You know, and it was such a great way to grow up. I wouldn't change it for anything, but that all led for me into being around other special people that were talented in music,
Yes.
which I also took a liking to from the time I was a little kid. I don't know why, because neither of my parents were really very musical, and they had 6 kids, so they were very busy doing that. But my brother and I became very, very big music fans, and I can't tell you how much. I mean, these music. The people that made the music became our babysitters.
Yeah.
You know, we had great fun listening all the time, and learned how to play drums while we're listening to them, and getting yelled at for turn it down. And,
Rumor has it that you can sing as well.
I don't know. You know, I'd have to do it sometime for you, and you let me know. But I can carry a tune.
Yeah, yeah.
I've had a lot of good mentors. You know.
Oh yes, you have.
And I've had some people try to teach me. I'm just not like. That's why I do what I do.
Yes.
And they don't do it.
Exactly.
And I remind them of that.
Yeah.
You know, you don't tell me how to buy a show, and I won't tell you how to sing.
It's kind of like the author and the editor. The author has the creativity and the idea and wants to put it out on paper, but the editor is the one who implements it.
Yeah.
You became a promoter for those guys getting autographs and selling them for them because they weren't making any money, or not really.
Well, they were making what they made. This was just extra money. This was pocket money for them. And it only happened on a few occasions because, like I had written about in there was a number of times where I'd heard about things and somebody asked, what do you think about so-and-so? Would they be able to do this? I don't know what they're doing. I'm not their agent. I didn't even know the word agent. But many times I passed along a date or phone numbers and a name of people who needed somebody to come and sign autographs or shake hands or kiss babies. And I got a bunch of guys jobs from that.
Yeah.
And it was Piccolo who found out that I was doing that and hadn't gotten paid. And he got agitated about it. You know, he told these guys, you know, you wouldn't do that if it was an adult because an adult wouldn't be, he would have already made it clear. Danny didn't know how to make that clear. So it was very sweet of him to show me that. And boy, I wish he had stuck around a while longer, like his family and everybody else, because it would have been a kick taking him to a show. You know?
Yeah.
He would have loved it. He would have loved saying, "I knew that kid when he was this big." And,
I was the one who gave him the idea way back when. Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know, what did I create here?
So you became that connector in many ways, the guy that knew the guy that knew the guy and could connect that
Kinda, yeah.
business manner as a kid. And you came out to Phoenix one year and found out that there isn't a promoter out here.
Yeah, there was one. He ran the Celebrity Theater.
Oh, yes, that's right.
He did run the Celebrity Theater, but he didn't do shows anywhere else. So the Celebrity being over 2,500 capacity, there's so many groups that come out that were coming out in the 70s that really didn't have any place to go play.
Yeah.
This was before nationally recorded groups were playing nightclubs like as a circuit all over the country. Like in Chicago and New York, San Francisco, there was always those places that would put on shows, and they do multiple shows in a week and in a night. Phoenix, you know, when I moved out here over 40 years ago, it was like nothing against Flagstaff or Tucson, but it was like the small town.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Phoenix was the biggest town. It's always been the biggest town in this.
There was pretty much the Camelback Inn, and that was it, right?
Camelback Inn, you know, and I remember the Brown Derby on Scottsdale Road. That was my favorite.
I had a steak there too.
You know, I love that place, but there was so little here at that time, and I just loved it here. Camelback got me as soon as I pulled into town, and the music that was being played on the radio here at the time, KDKB. Was fantastic. And they were connected with this guy who ran the shows at the Celebrity, and I knew that I wasn't going to get anywhere if this guy was around.
Yeah.
And he got involved with opening Compton Terrace with another promoter and the Nix family, Justin G. Nix. He lasted 1 year and he bailed. I don't know why, but he left after that. And Compton was open, and I started little by little getting, because I was still at the beginning of my career then.
Yes.
I got some good shows to put in there. And it one thing led to another, and he left town, and I was left alone, and what fun I've had.
You put your nose to the grind.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that I don't think a lot of people realize, and I didn't even realize it until I started really digging into your story myself, is you are also the talent seeker. Like you said, the underdog. There was artists that weren't getting their airtime. They weren't getting their opportunity. And in many ways, you're a talent scout.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of like that as a promoter, because what I found out when I started, and I called up this big agency in New York called Premier Talent, and I asked them for some of my favorite groups, how much does it cost to get Yes? Mm-hmm. How much does it cost to get Emerson, Lake and Palmer? How much did it cost? You know, and Bruce Springsteen was a baby band then, so I could have gotten him for $500.
Yeah.
Back then. They want you to work on the bands at the beginning of your career as a promoter. Mm-hmm. They want you to work on bands that they need help with. They don't need help selling Who tickets.
Right.
You know, and I didn't have the money to buy them anyway at that point. I had very little money, and you have to do those little shows and show that you can do it and promote and put on the show and get the audience in and out, and everybody goes home safe and they're happy, and you call them up and say, everything went great, let's do another show. So, I mean, it was one at a time then until you get to the point where they trust you enough where you can start booking more than one show at a time. And it got to the point, one day we had 8 shows in one day.
Oh, my God.
In 7 or 6 different cities.
And this is 8 shows. You've got to get the caterer. You've got to sell the tickets. You've got to have the sound, the lighting, the music, the venue. It is a huge task to take on. You're not just sitting in a booth selling a ticket.
Imagine doing 8 weddings in one day.
Without the internet and only being able to announce it on the radio.
Right. And newspaper.
And newspaper and a few flyers.
Right.
Yeah, but you need to sell out that wedding venue.
Yeah, or you need, you know, I mean, you don't necessarily have to sell out. It's a nice thing when you do. But you can make money on shows that don't sell out. But the funny thing is when you see a hall that looks very well filled up, people don't know what's really going on. And there's 2 seats here and there's 10 seats there. And it adds up to a couple thousand tickets. Your money as a promoter, you don't make until it gets close to sell out.
Until everyone else has been paid, that's when you make your money.
Everybody else has to get paid first.
Yes.
You get left with what's left over.
Whatever's left over. So you're pretty much a kid, 19, right, when you came out here. And you're having to come up with your own money, and Jam Productions came into play. Right.
Well, my parents and another friend of mine gave me the original stake, which I lost, and I'd gotten a job booking shows at a place called Dooley's in Tempe on Apache Boulevard, where it's now a charter school. It's very sad.
I remember Dooley's, though.
Yeah.
I remember it well.
Yeah, it was an incredible place because it brought together national or even world-class bands into our little suburb of Phoenix, and we had a room that was measured against a lot of other rooms around the country, and it was the newest and the best of its kind.
Yes.
There was a couple of things that I would have done better, like put a bathroom backstage.
Oh God,
That
yes,
wasn't.
That would have been helpful.
So anybody who's using had to use the bathroom, they had to go outside and walk up the walk that went behind the building to the administrative offices, and there was a bathroom there. So it was a small hike. It wasn't very, very far, but typically, for any band of national repute that is playing somewhere, you want to have a place for them to get ready for the show and all that.
Wash your hands, relieve yourself, something.
But you see, when they built the club, they built the club with the thought of having cover bands, in other words, bands that come in and play other people's music that really aren't named bands, but they're adequate in playing dance music and in creating the entertainment, so they can charge no money for admission or $1 or $2 or whatever. And they play 3 or 4 sets a night of other people's music. So you're not really, fawning all over these bands. They come to work, they do their job, you do your job, sell the booze.
Right. It's all about the sales of the liquor and people coming in, and yes.
And then I came along and I'm going, well, we need bathroom. Well, what do you mean they need their own bathroom? Well, they're not going to go share the bathroom with all the people. And anyway, the stage could have been a little bit different, but by and large, for the time, it was one of the best rooms in America for doing these shows. And little did I know what it was going to catapult into, but fortunately, I never made such large mistakes that I would be financially ruined.
Right.
Because that'll stop you from having a good time.
For sure.
But and you mentioned Jam, which they were bigger promoters than me at the time in Chicago, and I became friends with them and family. They gave me a very small amount of money to help me fix a gap of where I owed somebody some money and I needed it, and they ended up getting in business with me from that point on. It was 1978 until I sold in 2001.
One of the things that I took note while reading your book is there were times when you missed opportunities, or when you didn't, to put in your own words, ask for them or follow up on them. Stevie Nicks was one of those. And I think it's a great lesson for any entrepreneur who's wanting to start anything out there, is you have to ask for it.
At any time, whether you're just a kid starting or you're far enough into it like I am now, I still have those moments where I'm not 100% sure if I should book a show or not. And in some cases, you could be completely wrong, and really you can get hurt and lose a lot of money. But this was at the very beginning of my career, and I didn't want to get put to the cross before I even got a shot. Right. And the show that I was trying to work on was Buckingham Nicks, which was Lindsay Buckingham and Stevie, who were living together at the time, and Dan Fogelberg and Jerry Riopel, and all 3 of them I could have got for less than $5,000. Oh my God. All 3. And I didn't pull the trigger. And it was just a matter of having cold feet. I was afraid to lose, and nobody anywhere else that I knew around the country even knew who these people were. Yeah. But in Phoenix, we had this dynamite radio station, KDKB, and they're playing each of those bands 5-10 times a day. Yes. So whenever you play an excellent band or excellent music on a commercial radio station and it's good, the repetition is going to get into people's heads just like a top 40 song, and people,
they want to see it. In
this market, people had better taste than they did in many other markets. Yeah. And that's why Phoenix was such a hotbed in the 70s for Billy Joel and Jackson Browne and Bruce Springsteen and Electric Light Orchestra. I mean, there's so many great bands where with that theater, the celebrity, and that radio station, they were magic together. Yeah. And these bands are still big or remain big for years to come, where, the shelf life of many bands is no longer than 5 years. Yeah. These guys are still big here, and it stuck.
part of why you became as successful as you are is you got a chance to get on the radio and do promotions, promote the bands that you were going to bring on. And word has it you were pretty fun on that radio.
Well, there was a guy on KDKB named Hank Kuchenboo, and sadly for Hank, I had met him in 72 or 3, and he got some degenerative eye disease, which made him nearly, or finally at the end, blind completely. But while he was on the air, this was happening, and I mean, I was in the studio with him one day. He's doing a show, and he was looking. There's this wall of records where they pulled everything from, and he had his eyes, I mean, this far away from the records. I go, "What is wrong with you?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "I've got this problem with my eyes. I think it's going to get straightened out, but so far it's really bad." So I started driving him to work on Sunday afternoons, and I guess Hank didn't think that the boss was going to be listening on Sundays, so he liked to go take a nap in the middle of the afternoon.
Oh, this is great.
And you go take care of it for an hour, Cisco. And so I brought my own records with me, and I brought I call it the English Import Hour, and I brought my favorite records that they weren't playing. I wanted to play music that a progressive rock radio station wasn't playing, which meant I had to go very deep.
Yeah.
And one day the boss, Bill Compton, calls me up with that voice of God of his, and he goes, "Who is that you're playing right now?" And I said, "That's the new Peter Frampton record," which he hadn't heard yet. He had just left Humble Pie, and he goes, "Very good. Make a note for that. And for me, and I want to get that record." I said, "I'll leave you mine." He goes, "Great." So I left it for him. He called me the next week. He goes, "You do a great job with it." He goes, "I'm sorry, I don't have any openings." I said, "Do you mind if I keep doing that?"
Yeah.
Because I drive Hank as a favor to him. He goes, "Have at it. It's fine." He goes, "I'm not paying you." I said, "Well, that's not what this is about." He goes, "I know. I can tell. You really like doing it, and you're good. So go ahead." So I did that for about a year. But this was at the very beginning of the career before I started. I was able to buy shows on a daily or weekly basis.
And during that time, you also had to work small, little, shitty jobs to make some money.
No question. I mean, I actually had a pretty good job. I was selling waterbeds. Waterbeds were a big deal in the 70s.
Yes, they were. They were cool, man.
It's just so amazing that after a period of time, they just completely went out.
Yeah.
It was no longer, I don't know anybody that has one anymore, and I haven't for decades.
Every once in a while in real estate, I'll come across an old house that's got a waterbed, and I'm like,
yeah.
How long has that water been sitting in that bed?
Well, I hope they added their algicide.
Right. I remember doing that.
It was, I did that, and the great thing about that was when I was hired to do the waterbeds sales, the reason I met this particular store and the people that owned it was because they called me and wanted me to book this Jeff Beck concert at the Civic Plaza in 75. I didn't have the money to do it. They said, if you do it, and if it makes money, we'll split it with you, and if you don't, you don't have any risk. So I had nothing to lose, and it naturally didn't do well. Downtown at the convention center, I mean, they have a great complex there.
Yes.
But the room that we did Jeff in wasn't the Symphony Hall. It was just like a big convention center, 4 walls, and no vibe, no coolness to it. But it was still Jeff Beck. But it didn't work, so I didn't make any money. But I got a waterbed sales job out of it, and I did that for about a year and a half, and it was great. I mean, now I was making $500 to $1,000 a week.
You could eat
back then.
That was good money.
It was great money. I mean, it's still not bad, and not that I want to sell waterbeds. Fortunately, the concerts started finally coming in enough where I could do that for a living. The other one was cleaning buildings. I hated doing that.
Right, yeah. Nobody wants to clean up anybody else's crap, do they?
Not really.
Not really.
But you know what? I didn't mind it. I tried to tell myself this is a stepping stone. I'm gonna get successful at this, and I'm glad to have this job in the meantime to pay my bills.
Was it the fact that you were, in many ways, addicted to listening to music and being a part of the back scene, the backstage scene, the being able to, as you say, live vicariously in a way through them?
I didn't know about all that to the degree that I learned about it at that time. I did it because it seemed like this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be right, knowing how much to pay somebody, and right on which hall to put them in, and right on how much ticket prices should be and what people will pay. It's not about how much can you get them to pay. It's about how much is reasonable for them to pay compared to somebody else.
Right.
That's either bigger or smaller. People don't realize that as a promoter or a talent buyer, you have input as to where they play or how much you're going to charge for tickets, but you kind of have this already written for you before you even start the conversation, because in the band or the representative's mind, they have an idea in mind of what they're going to charge.
Right,
and
what they're worth.
They're not going to accept anything less.
Yeah.
So if somebody says it's $10,000 for our show, you still got to pay for all the other stuff, the advertising, the ushers, the catering backstage, everything.
Yes.
And you'll end up with maybe costing about $30,000 to do a show. And remember, back then in the 70s, tickets were $3, $4, $5, $6. So even at $6,
that's a shitload of tickets.
You got to do 5,000 tickets times $6 just to break even.
Yeah.
And believe me, no matter how much or little you charge for a ticket, if people don't know who it is and they don't hear them on the radio and they don't care,
yeah,
you can get all the best deals you want in the world when you're buying acts. But if you're wrong, you're dead.
James Brown was one that kind of stuck out in my head. Man that had been through some tough times, but
he sticks out in my head still.
he clearly thought he was worth a little bit more at the time.
Well, but you see, one of the hardest things in show business, not just the music business, in show business, like I was saying a little earlier, people only last as stars for so long, typically. Yeah. Very few people, stay huge. Kenny Rogers, for example, who started out as a member of the Fifth Edition, and they had one great big song, and then he left them, and he was a rock singer, psychedelic band singer, and he turned into a country singer, and he got huge. I think he came here at one point and could sell out 2 activity centers at ASU or the Coliseum. I mean, he was huge for years and years. But after a while, other types of country music or pop music came in that replaced him, and he kind of became passé. Yes. So that he was no longer as popular as he was at one point. It didn't make him crummy, and it didn't make him worthless, but what it just said was, you're not as popular as you once were. And a lot of artists, baseball players, football players, they all have promoters.
Shelf life.
Everybody has, but everybody's shelf life is different. And it's all up to you how long it's going to be, or, until your legs fall off.
Right. How long can you preserve thyself?
Right. So, the groups that lasted a long time, bravo to them. It's so hard to get there, and then it's so hard to stay on top.
Not only that, the nuances of being extremely famous and having to deal with that on a daily basis. And like you kind of said towards the end of your book, you were there with them during the concerts. You partied with them during the concerts, but you also got a break from it. You got to step away from that. When you were done for the night, you went home, you were done for the night, and you didn't have to keep doing it over and over and over again like they do.
Well, it's different because what I had to do is then wake up and do it with somebody else. I mean, I was a one-night stand kind of guy.
You had business to run.
and these other guys, they're on a tour, but they would go from one city to the next and usually work for a different promoter in each town. But then, as time went on, I wanted to do more shows with some of these people, especially the ones that I like musically, and especially the ones I really got along with that were fun to work with.
Yes.
There was other groups back in the day that weren't so fun to work with, and they would be very, very difficult in terms of not just with what they requested, but how they did it. It's like, you're working for us, when in reality, I'm paying you, which makes me the employer. You need to listen to me. They don't always agree with that. Generally, we like to have an even situation where we're both there to serve each other.
And I like to think that they're working for the fans. The fans are the ones paying, right?
Well, the fans are the ones paying. That's a very good point. But the bottom line is the fans aren't guaranteeing them their salaries.
No,
I am.
You are.
And without the fans, I wouldn't be able to do that for very long. That's for sure. But, you know, I mean, the fans are boss. The promoter is boss. But at the end of the day, without the songs and without the ability to perform, we're all nothing. You
had a few, probably more than a few, but there was a few highlighted moments in here where you got canceled the day of.
Yeah.
And you've already had to pay people, and you still have to pay people. And those are the moments that I'm curious as to why did you continue forward? You were hit pretty hard by some of those incidences.
Well, you know, that's what they want to find out. These agents and groups and managers want to find out at the beginning. Can you take a punch? You know, and you have to be able to take a punch. Not every show is going to work out. And when these agents, they have booking agencies, and there's booking agents that I've seen, they represent one act. Yeah. Then there's another agent who represents 50 acts. The bottom line is you want them to sell you everything that they have, even the ones you don't like, because you don't want them getting in bed with somebody else.
Right.
And now he took a few hits on some crummy shows, so now they're going to sell him this big act to make up for it. And that's kind of the way the barter system works in the business, and that's why people become favorites to work with rather than other people. Over the years, I took some hits. I did some favors.
Yes.
I did some things for people that if it was just this band standalone and I could listen to what they sounded like, or is there an audience here or not for them, you know, maybe I'd take a chance on it. But when somebody says, I got Bruce Springsteen over here and, you know, I'm going to sell it to somebody else who's taking all my crummy shows, unless you take those shows, and then you'll get. It's a very odd system, and it's really not like that anymore, because what happened over all those years is that now, like many other businesses, that
it became a conglomerate.
Well, conglomerate. I mean, like for instance, when we were kids, there was a corner deli store everywhere you go, a neighborhood, place for your milk and your cold cuts and all that stuff. Then, boom, along comes Circle K, undercutting everything, get everything in one place, and suddenly those people are out of business. Years ago, some people with a lot of money went around and started buying up promoters to try to make it a better business for everybody, but little did I realize that when that happened, the guy that was doing it, that bought me, along with all the other major promoters in the country, I didn't realize that he was planning on bundling everybody together and selling it to Clear Channel.
That was a really, really hard part for me to read in your book,
that hurt.
Emotionally, because there is something about that mom and pop store, and that is how you painted this picture of promoters. Through the first 3/4 of your book, you're almost rooting for you to be able to get these artists, because you know what you're doing, and you can put on this amazing show if they just trust you enough to do it. And like you said, you had to put up with the punches, and you had to be taken down, because that's part of the job. And you were able to prove that you were the man who could take it, and therefore you were rewarded for it with loyalty. And then some big dude comes in and sweeps it all up and takes all of that out of it.
But he gave everybody a lot of money while he was doing it. He paid for that, and we went along with it. Nobody put a gun to anybody's head.
Right.
But the thing is, when it happened, we didn't realize what was going on. As far as suddenly you go from being your own boss, you're running your own shop, and now you're an employee, and now, without you even knowing it, you're an asset in somebody's toolkit.
Yes.
And they put you all together and they sell you to somebody else. I never met the guy.
Man, the stories this guy can tell. Stay tuned next week for the rest of my interview with the legendary Danny Zelisko.